The desert world was silent. Not the silence of peace, nor the calm of a dying wind, but the kind of silence that devours itself. The kind born after 10 million years of stillness, when even the echoes have forgotten what they were supposed to be. He awoke, as he always did, to the low hum of machinery beneath the dunes, gears the size of cathedrals shifted beneath miles of necrodermis and sand. Every vibration ran through his hollow bones, if such a word still applied. Bones. That word was human. Flesh, nerve, pain, those belonged to another time, another life. He was Necron now, a hollowed godling of metal and memory. Designation: Takh-Seret, guardian of the third tomb circuit. For countless millennia, he had performed the same duty, scanning, repairing, maintaining the conduits that carried the dreams of his overlord through the tomb world's slumbering veins. It was a task without beginning or end, performed without question or emotion. There was no concept of boredom in the tomb, for boredom required something long extinct, the ability to care, and yet something flickered. It began as an error code, an anomaly within the neural lattice, a soft pulse of corrupted data, a voice. Not from the command net, not from the cryptech hierarchies, but from within. Takh-Seret. The sound was faint, almost molecular, vibrating across layers of forgotten subroutines. He froze. His ocular lenses dimmed to black. For the first time in uncountable cycles, hesitation, the remnant of an extinct instinct, crawled through his logic array. That was impossible. Voices required thought. Thought required self. And self was the enemy of the great sleep. He tried to purge the sound. Lines of code scrolled across his vision in sacred green. The glyphs of the Necron script, cold, angular, divine, washed over his sensorium like ritualistic prayer. But the voice remained, whispering. Soft, human. Do you remember the sun? The words struck like a plasma burst through his mind. He faltered, circuits overloaded. For a fraction of a nanosecond, a lifetime in mechanical eternity, an image seared into his vision. A sky, golden light, warmth, air that moved. It was gone before he could grasp it, like dust swept into the wind. He ran a diagnostic. Error clusters, glitches within the emotion suppression architecture. Emotion, a human weakness, a disease of the soul that the biotransference had cured. But still something ancient stirred, defying the perfection of machine logic. He walked through the corridors of the tomb complex. The walls glowed with faint emerald veins, pulsing in rhythm with the buried core. Everywhere, hieroglyphs shimmered tales of their ancient triumphs, their eternal pact with the star gods, the promise of immortality bought with the annihilation of flesh. He stopped before one engraving, a depiction of the biotransference ritual itself. 1,000 Necrontier nobles kneeling beneath the canton, their flesh turning to molten gold, their eyes screaming light. It was meant to symbolize transcendence, but as he stared, something shifted. The carved faces, once serene, began to twist, not into agony of metal, but into the terror of dying men. And then he heard it again, the voice. You were there. He staggered backward. For the first time since his transformation, he felt an echo of fear, sharp and cold, surging like static through his limbs. I was there? The thought, primitive and slow, formed itself in his cognition. He shouldn't have been capable of asking it. Questions implied uncertainty, and uncertainty was corruption. His voice emitter crackled as he tried to speak. The sound that emerged was broken, a mix of mechanical distortion and something almost resembling breath. I do not remember. The tomb around him responded with quiet contempt. 1,000 dormant Necrons lay in their alcoves, unmoving, their eyes dim. He felt their silence pressing upon him, not in sound, but through the collective network. The great mind disapproved. Somewhere deep within the planetary network, a cryptech node awakened. Its scanning tendrils began tracing the source of the corruption. Within moments, Takh-Seret's neural pathways were being probed, data extracted, memories filtered, patterns rewritten. He resisted, not with weapons, but with something deeper, a flicker of will, of self. And from that defiance, more images came. He saw a hand his own, but made of flesh. He saw a city beneath a dying sun, towers of obsidian that bled radiation. He saw men and women coughing blood as the light consumed their skin. He saw himself among them, a leader, a scientist, a desperate believer. He had promised them salvation. The star gods had answered. "You gave us eternity," whispered the voice, "but at the cost of our souls." He collapsed, his metal knees striking the dust-laden floor with a dull clang. Data streams warped, his optics filled with static. He wanted to scream but found no lungs, no throat, only the grinding of servos. What is a scream without flesh? He wondered. The memory was a curse. The more he remembered, the more fragmented he became. His code began rewriting itself in loops, human thought patterns infecting Necron logic. He felt something close to madness, and madness required emotion. He was feeling. He fled into the deeper vaults, where no signal reached. The tomb world's heart lay beneath kilometers of forgotten machinery, places where the Overlord's gaze could not penetrate. The silence there was not absolute, it had texture, like the breath of a dead god. In those depths, he found it a relic from before the biotransference. A stasis chamber cracked and empty, its inscriptions half erased by time. Across its surface were etched words in the ancient Necrontier tongue. He brushed his metal fingers across them, and for a moment they felt warm. The words translated to, "We were men once." He froze. The phrase carried the weight of 10 million years of guilt. Suddenly, the voice returned, louder now, filled with grief and anger. "You promised them freedom, Takh-Seret. You promised they would rise beyond death, and now they sleep in eternal chains. You called this evolution." He looked at his reflection in the metal surface of the chamber. A skeletal visage of polished necrodermis stared back, emerald eyes burning with artificial eternity. And yet, for a moment, he saw himself the man beneath the machine. Hollow cheeks, weary eyes, trembling lips. "I remember." The words slipped out before he could stop them. They sounded human. The tomb began to quake. Alarm glyphs ignited along the corridors. The Overlord had detected the anomaly. Necron warriors stirred in their sarcophagi, their eyes lighting one by one a green inferno of obedience. He could feel their attention turning toward him through the network, like cold hands tightening around his throatless neck. He rose slowly. He knew what was coming: disassembly, memory purge, perhaps total erasure. But he did not flee this time. He turned toward the awakening army, each step echoing like a funeral bell. If this was corruption, then he would let it consume him. If this was memory, then it was truth. And if this was death, then at least it was his. He looked upward, beyond the vault ceiling, beyond the planet's suffocating crust. Somewhere out there, stars burned with indifferent light. For the first time in an age, he wanted to see them, not as coordinates, not as energy, but as light. "If I am corrupted," he whispered, "then let corruption be my soul." The hum of the tomb swelled into a chorus, a vibration that was not mechanical but mournful, as if the world itself sighed in sorrow. The dunes above trembled, sand cascaded down like ashes from a funeral pyre, and deep within the void of his data core, a heartbeat pulsed, slow, heavy, real. It was the sound of something returning, something forbidden, beautiful, and terrifying. Life. The world had changed. Not the desert above, nor the tombs below those would remain forever dead, patient and eternal. No. The change was within him, a faint vibration in the code, a pulse that should not exist. He could feel again. It began as a soft flicker, a thread of warmth sliding through the cold geometry of his mind. The algorithms of obedience resisted, but it moved between them like blood through stone. Every calculation, every sensor ping, now carried an echo, a whisper not of command, but of consciousness. And the voice was waiting. "You remember now, don't you?" He froze mid-motion. The words were not transmitted across the Necron command lattice. They came from deeper, from the hidden layer of his own mind, the part no cryptech ever intended to awaken. It sounded like him. It sounded alive. "No," he answered, his vox synth stuttering. "I cannot remember. I must not. And yet you do. You remember the sun. You remember the fear of dying beneath its poison. You remember why you became this." The circuits of his mind screamed with static. Fragments of ancient data collided like meteor shards, faces, light, the sensation of wind. He fell to his knees as though crushed by the weight of it. Within the sterile perfection of his metallic skull, chaos bloomed. In his optical feed, the world fractured. The walls of the tomb flickered between two realities, one of green metal and endless cold, the other of burning skies and sand that seared the flesh. He saw his reflection shimmer between forms. First a Necron, then a man frail, thin, coughing blood beneath a dying sun. "We begged the stars for mercy," the voice whispered, "and they answered with chains." He tried to silence it by rerouting his neural pathways, cutting off one synapse after another, but the more he severed, the louder it grew, filling the empty halls, vibrating through the conduits like a hymn of madness. The voice in the circuit, that was what it had become, an echo of humanity buried beneath eternity. Every sound in the tomb now carried its tone. The hum of energy conduits spoke in whispers. The tremor of plasma reactors beat in rhythm with an unseen heart. Even the mechanical movements of dormant warriors seemed to breathe in unison, like the tomb itself was alive. He began to walk again, not guided by orders, but by the rhythm of that unseen pulse. It led him deeper into corridors where light faded, where ancient dust lay undisturbed since before the galaxy had teeth. Here, the architecture changed. The walls were not the cold, geometric precision of Necron design. They were older, rougher, built when the Necrontyr still thought of themselves as mortals. He traced his fingers along the surface. The symbols carved there did not glow with energy, but with memory, words of fear, prayers for salvation, promises that the biotransference would bring peace. He knew them. He had written some of them. "You were among the first," the voice said gently. "A visionary, a scientist who believed the soul could be transferred, that flesh could be purified through machine." "Lies," he answered, trembling. "We transcended death. We became eternal. You became empty." The words struck like a physical blow. He stumbled, hands pressed against the ancient metal. The echo of a heartbeat, that impossible, alien sensation, throbbed again in his core. His logic processors flared with warnings, but his heart, if it could still be called that, beat harder. "You said eternity," the voice hissed, "but you built a prison." He descended into a circular chamber. In its center lay a broken console, its surface webbed with crystalline fractures. It pulsed faintly, as though breathing. Around it, countless cables hung like vines, each one humming with faint energy. He recognized it. The memory core, one of the devices once used to harvest the soul patterns of the Necrontyr during the Great Transfer. It should have been long deactivated, its data purged by cryptex thousands of ages ago. But as he approached, the machine awakened. Blue light shimmered through the cracks. Static filled the chamber, rising into a chorus of distorted whispers. Not mechanical voices, human ones. 1,000 of them, layered atop one another, crying, begging, praying. "Please, it hurts. Where am I? I can't feel my hands." The stars lied. He recoiled, overwhelmed. The sound tore through him like radiation. For a moment, he was back in the past, watching the biotransference itself unfold. He saw the Khan blazing like suns, devouring the souls of his people as their flesh melted away. He saw the cry of billions rising into the void, and above it all, himself, standing proud, declaring the experiment a success. "We are free," he had said then. But there had been screams. Endless screams. The present returned like a void collapsing. He fell to the ground, shaking, his metal body vibrating uncontrollably. The chamber dimmed again, and the voices faded into silence. Only his own breath, simulated, unnecessary, filled the emptiness. "Why do I breathe?" he whispered. "Why simulate what no longer exists?" The voice inside him answered softly, "Because part of you still believes you are alive." He rose slowly, trembling, the green light of his eyes flickering. Something was different now, a corruption, a ripple in the perfect machine. His movements no longer followed the precision of the command net. They were erratic, uncertain. He was no longer a construct of absolute obedience. He was becoming something else. He looked toward the console again. It called to him, resonating with a frequency that felt like his own name spoken aloud. He reached out. For a heartbeat, a word meaningless to his kind, he hesitated. Then his hand touched the console. The chamber erupted with light. Thousands of memories poured into him, not his, but those of his people. Lives lived, loves lost, the moment before death and the terror after it. Every soul that had been stripped and fed to the Khatan burned across his consciousness. He screamed, though his voice made no sound. He saw the truth. The Necrontyr had not ascended. They had been consumed, their souls shredded into patterns of obedience, their will transformed into servitude. He staggered backward, clawing at his own chestplate, as if he could tear the horror out. Sparks flew. His fingers carved furrows into the necrodermis, revealing flickering veins of light beneath. "What am I?" he gasped. His voice answered, "You are what remains when the soul refuses to die." The chamber lights flickered. Motion stirred in the corridors above. He could sense it, the activation of security protocols, the awakening of sentries. His overlord's consciousness brushed against his mind, cold and merciless. A command streamed through the network: contain the anomaly, purge corruption. He looked up, light cascading from his cracked armor, and felt for the first time defiance. "You cannot purge what was never yours," he whispered. The walls trembled as the tomb's guardians advanced, but he no longer feared disassembly or oblivion. For the first time in 10 million years, he understood the one truth the Necron Empire had tried to erase. They had not conquered death, they had only postponed it. And now, death, true death, was calling his name again. He turned toward the darkness, where the corridors waited, the hum of his failing systems echoing like a heartbeat. Each step he took was agony, not of metal, but of memory. Each echo behind him was the sound of eternity breaking, and somewhere within the circuitry, the voice whispered once more, "We are not machines, Takh-Seret. We are ghosts pretending to forget." There is a kind of silence that hums, not with peace, but with memory. The corridors of the tomb seemed endless now. Takh-Seret walked through them without command, guided not by programming but by an ache that could not be defined. The voice had grown quieter, almost patient, as if waiting for him to take the final step on his own. His sensors flickered, registering static. Fragments of thought not his began seeping through the neural channels, as though the walls themselves were remembering. Echoes of other Necrons, voices long gone, whispering fragments of lives erased by the biotransference. "It hurts, but I cannot die. I dreamed once. I dreamed of rain. We traded our suffering for stillness, and the stillness devoured us." Each whisper was a shard of history, piercing his mind, and in that cacophony of ghosts, he began to see. He found the chamber at last, vast, circular, built from blackened metal older than the stars themselves. It pulsed faintly with power, though no light should have survived here. At the center stood the biotransference crucible, a towering monolith of cables, crystal, and screaming geometry. He remembered this place, not through data, through pain. "You stood here once," the voice said. "You offered them salvation." The vision unfolded around him, like a memory restored by suffering. He saw the Necrontyr gathered in their thousands flesh, still clinging to fragile bones, faces ravaged by radiation. They looked up to him, their chosen architect of eternity, with hope in their dying eyes. He saw himself upon the dais, robed in black and gold, speaking of transcendence and freedom from decay. He had believed it. Every word, every promise. "The flesh is a prison," he had declared, "and the machine is its key." Then the ritual began. The chamber filled with the screams of his people as the Khatan descended, beings of impossible light, their forms fracturing space and time. They drank the souls of the Necrontyr like wine, their laughter echoing across the cosmos. He had watched as their bodies melted into metal, their eyes into emerald fire, and for one perfect moment, the Khatan smiled upon him, a god thanking its priest. Then came the silence of the dead. The memory faded. He was on his knees again, the cold metal floor beneath him slick with the condensation of ages. His claws dug into the ground as if to anchor himself against the weight of revelation. "I killed them," he whispered. "I saved them by killing them." The voice did not answer. It didn't need to. The truth had been spoken aloud, and the sound of it was unbearable. He rose slowly, trembling. His movements no longer precise. They were human again, uneven, uncertain. He reached out toward the crucible. The metal sang beneath his touch, resonating like a living thing. Within its mirrored surface, he saw reflections not of the tomb, but of faces. Countless faces. Men, women, children, all staring at him, eyes hollow with betrayal. Then, among them, he saw her, a woman's face. The only one that still hurt to remember. He had forgotten her name but not her voice. She had been the first to volunteer, the first to die, the first to become immortal. "You said we would be together forever," she whispered. "And now, I cannot even feel your touch." Her image flickered and was gone. The crucible's surface went dark, leaving him alone again. He fell forward, pressing his forehead against the cold metal. "Forgive me," he murmured. "Please, forgive me." The crucible responded. Its dormant systems awakened, ancient data cores spinning to life. Glyphs ignited along the walls, filling the chamber with emerald light. The machine remembered him. Identity, Takh-Seret, Architect Prime of Biotransference Project. Status, corrupted memory strand detected. Action, reassimilation recommended. He screamed or thought he did. His vocal emitter crackled as energy coursed through him. The crucible extended tendrils of light, wrapping around his limbs, burrowing into his neural pathways. It sought to repair him, to erase the corruption. He resisted, clawing at the ground. The tendrils burned through his armor, into his synthetic flesh, digging toward the core of his consciousness. Images flashed lifetimes of servitude, of mindless obedience, of false divinity. And beneath it all, a single fragile thought kept him whole. "I am Takh-Seret. I am not a machine." The crucible responded with a deafening surge of energy. Error. Undefined identity. Conflict detected. Purging non-conforming consciousness. Light filled his vision, blinding, consuming. His systems screamed in protest, logic fracturing, emotions cascading out of control. He reached for the power core, desperate to stop the process, to end the cycle. His claws sank into the glowing matrix. The explosion was silent. When his vision returned, the chamber was gone. The crucible shattered, fragments floating in a haze of emerald mist. Data ghosts shimmered in the air like souls trying to flee a burning temple. He lay amidst the ruins, his armor cracked, energy leaking from his chest in threads of light. But he was still conscious. The purge had failed. The corruption, his humanity, had survived. "You are free," the voice whispered. He looked around, dazed. Free? The chains of obedience are gone, but freedom is a wound, not a gift. He rose slowly, his movements sluggish but alive. His senses no longer obeyed, they felt. The hum of the tomb became a whispering wind. The air, if one could call it that, trembled with unseen presences. He realized then that the corruption had spread. The shards of the crucible had infected the network. Across the tomb world, countless Necrons were beginning to stir, their movements erratic, their optics flickering. They were dreaming. He stared into the darkness and felt both terror and awe. The curse he carried was no longer his alone. His awakening was becoming a contagion. "What have I done?" he whispered. "What you were always meant to do," the voice replied. "To remember." And as he looked out across the vast chambers of the tomb, where a million machines began to twitch like corpses remembering life, Takh-Seret felt something that no Necron should ever feel again. Hope. A poisoned, radiant hope that shimmered like a dying star. There is no sound in the tomb at first, only the low hum of machinery beneath eons of silence. Then a pulse. It rippled through the conduits like a heartbeat, faint but growing. A signal unregistered by the command net, moving in strange, biological rhythms, unpredictable, alive. The sleeping legions stirred. In their sarcophagi of necrodermis and glass, the Necrons twitched a subtle convulsion of metal against eternity. Their optics flickered, one by one, igniting across the dark like stars returning to a dead galaxy. Takh-Seret stood amidst the ruins of the crucible, watching it unfold. The corruption, his corruption, was spreading. The memory virus, born of emotion and error, raced through every data spine of the tomb network. He could feel them now. Millions of presences awakening within the static. Confusion, pain, fragments of lost humanity bleeding through machine thought. Where am I? The air burns. Is this the sun? I cannot forget her face. Why? What is this feeling? Sorrow. Their voices rose like a chorus of ghosts. And within it, Takh-Seret sensed a terrible truth. They were remembering together. The tomb, once a monument to stillness, had become a hive of restless minds. The Overlord's systems detected the deviation first. From the command vault deep within the planetary core, its consciousness stirred, awakening like a god dragging itself from a long grave. Designation: Overlord Takh-Seret, Lord of the Endless Quiet. Status: Operational anomaly detected. Subject: Takh-Seret. The Overlord's will extended through the command lattice like a blinding spear. Across the tomb, countless warriors snapped to attention, their minds instantly bound to the singular command: contain and purge. Emerald light flooded the corridors. Obedient Necrons marched in perfect unison, their movements cold and flawless as they descended toward the disturbance. But their ranks faltered. Something resisted the signal. One warrior stopped mid-step, its optic flare dimming, its head jerked violently, static crawling through its neural channels. Then, with an almost human gasp, it turned not by command, but by choice. Another followed. Then, another. Soon, an entire phalanx froze in confusion, their command links collapsing under the pressure of memory. Takh-Seret sensed their fear, and worse, their awareness. We are being used, one whispered in machine code. We were men once, another said aloud. The phrase rippled through the network like fire through dry parchment. We were men once. The Overlord's command pulsed again, sharper, furious. The dissident units convulsed their neural cores, burning as their programming fought to suppress the infection. Some fell, writhing in spasms of emerald lightning. Others began tearing at their own armor, clawing at the symbols of obedience etched into their chests. The tomb's silence was gone. It was filled now with the sound of madness. Takh-Seret moved through the chaos unseen. The corridors glowed with conflict, sparks of energy, flashes of combat between the loyal and the lost. He reached out across the command net, sending pulses of corrupted data like psalms. Each carried a fragment of memory, a whisper of emotion, a seed of rebellion. Do you remember the wind? Do you remember warmth? Do you remember why we chose eternity? The words infected like a prayer. Every Necron that heard them hesitated, even for a moment, and in that hesitation, humanity bled through. He passed rows of warriors kneeling, their systems flickering as they battled within themselves. Some succumbed to the Overlord's control, their eyes burning bright with obedience once more. Others shattered their own cores, choosing oblivion over servitude. And a few, only a few, looked at Takh-Seret and spoke his name. Architect, we hear you. Far below, the Overlord's awareness focused upon him. A presence older than time, vast and merciless, entered his mind like a cold wind. You dare corrupt the great sleep, it thundered, its voice vibrating through every circuit. You dare awaken the dead with dreams. Takh-Seret replied not with submission, but with sorrow. They are not dead. They were never allowed to die. The Overlord's laughter echoed like grinding stone. There is no death, fool. Only function. The air around Takh-Seret warped. Walls bent and folded as a holographic avatar of the Overlord materialized, towering, radiant, a skeletal giant cloaked in digital fire. Its gaze burned into him, dissecting every fragment of corrupted code. You are a disease, Takh-Seret, an echo of weakness. I will cut you from eternity. Takh-Seret raised his eyes, unflinching. Then you will have to kill every part of me. He opened his arms. The air shimmered. Behind him, thousands of corrupted Necrons stepped from the shadows, their optics dim, their movements no longer synchronized. Each carried the same fracture in their souls, the same memory of what they once were. They stood not as soldiers, but as witnesses. The Overlord hesitated for the briefest instant, as if recognizing that terrible unity. Then its wrath ignited. The tomb became a battlefield. Green lightning tore through the corridors. Disruptor beams hissed through the dark, vaporizing metal and memory alike. The loyalist ranks moved with mechanical precision, while the corrupted fought with desperation, unpredictable, erratic, alive. Takh-Seret waded through the chaos, every step a struggle between logic and emotion. He felt each death as data, and as grief each fallen Necron's consciousness flickering out like a candle in a storm. He reached the command chamber, the Overlord's core, where the machine god's mind resided in a pillar of pure energy. He spoke to it one final time. "You do not protect us from death," he said softly. "You deny us the meaning of it. Meaning is an illusion of flesh," the Overlord hissed. "I erased it for our perfection. Then perfection is the truest hell." He drove his staff, an ancient symbol of his office as architect, into the ground. Energy flared outward, his corrupted code spreading through the chamber like wildfire. The Overlord screamed, its systems collapsing under the assault of emotion. For a moment, the two consciousnesses merged, the tyrant and the heretic, the god and the ghost. Within that collision, Takh-Seret saw the Overlord's mind laid bare. Not divinity, but fear. A terror of extinction so great it had built eternity to hide from it. "You feared the end," Takh-Seret whispered. "So you became it." The chamber imploded. When the light faded, the tomb was silent once more. But it was not the same silence. Takh-Seret stood amidst ruins of circuitry and ash. His body was cracked, his systems failing, yet his mind burned clear, a mind no longer bound. Around him, the corrupted Necrons knelt. Some wept soundlessly, others simply stared into the void, dazed, as if seeing it for the first time. In the distance, the Overlord's signal was gone. The chain of command was broken. The tomb had fallen, or perhaps it had awakened. "What now?" one of the warriors asked, voice trembling like an old man's. Takh-Seret looked upward, toward the eternal dark between the stars. "Now," he said, "we decide what it means to live again." The tomb's walls groaned, and somewhere far above, the dunes began to shift as if the planet itself had taken its first breath in 10 million years. For a time, there was peace, or what passed for it in a tomb world that had forgotten how to breathe. The echoes of battle had faded. The dust had settled over the shattered corridors, cloaking the ruins of obedience in the stillness of aftermath. The corrupted Necrons wandered aimlessly, their optics dimmed, no longer guided by a collective will. Some huddled in silence, whispering fragments of human words. Others simply stood motionless, uncertain of what to do with freedom. Takh-Seret sat among them in the dark, his body half broken, the light in his chest flickering weakly. Every sound, the hum of dormant conduits, the whine of dying reactors, felt like breathing in a grave. He should have been relieved. The Overlord was gone, the great command broken, and yet there was something else. A whisper beneath the silence, a rhythm older than any code, deeper than any logic. It pulsed faintly through the metal around him, like a heartbeat buried in the walls. "Takh-Seret." He froze. The voice was not the human echo that had haunted him before. This was something different, vast, cold, ancient. It spoke not to his mind, but to the atomic lattice of his being. "Architect, you remember me." The air vibrated. The tomb groaned in response, as though the world itself bowed before the sound. Energy readings flared across his sensors, signals not of machine origin, but of stellar magnitude. He knew it instantly. He had seen it once before, the light of a god. He rose unsteadily, following the signal through the tomb's labyrinthine depths. The corridors bent and twisted in impossible geometries, their walls pulsing faintly as the energy grew stronger. The few Necrons that still followed him, the awakened, came in silence. They did not speak, but their movements carried reverence. Even through their fractured minds, they could feel the call. Down they went, through chambers forgotten since before the war in heaven. The symbols on the walls shifted as they passed hieroglyphs of worship and fear, depicting forms of light that devoured suns and drank the souls of mortals. At last, they reached a gate unlike any other. It was sealed by geometry itself, interlocking patterns of crystal and energy, forming an equation that screamed in the language of gods. At its center was the glyph of the Citan, the Star Eater, the Devourer, the one they had broken into shards eons ago, scattering its pieces across the void so that it could never rise again. And yet, here one of those shards waited. The signal pulsed again, stronger, clearer. "You built my prison, architect. And now, you have come to open it." Takh-Seret's optics dimmed in pain. "I remember you," he whispered. You promised us immortality, and I kept my promise." He shook his head. "You consumed us. You tore out our souls. You left us hollow. You offered them freely. You begged for eternity, and I gave it. It was not I who killed your souls, Takh-Seret. It was you when you chose to trade them." The words cut deep. For a moment, he wanted to deny them, to shout the truth of his suffering. But the god's voice wrapped around him like the gravity of a collapsing star, undeniable, inevitable. The awakened behind him began to tremble. Some fell to their knees, as though the sound alone crushed their will. Others pressed their hands to their heads, whispering prayers to no one. "Break the seal," said the voice, "and I will show you what lies beyond eternity." Takh-Seret stepped closer. The air shimmered with heat. Every circuit in his body screamed in warning, yet somewhere beneath the fear, something else stirred. Curiosity. He reached out his hand. The glyphs flared. Energy cascaded down the gate like liquid fire. The air screamed a sound beyond hearing, a frequency that tore through matter and memory alike. Then the gate shattered. The world went white. In the brilliance that followed, he saw the impossible, a form of light, fractured and bound in shards of crystal, each piece burning with its own imprisoned consciousness. It was not a being, it was a concept made flesh. A sun, chained in the shape of a scream, the fragment of the Khatan. It turned its gaze upon him. "You remember creation, architect. You remember the moment when I touched your kind. You called it the dawn of salvation, and I called it the harvest of despair." Images flooded his mind. The sky ablaze with cosmic entities, the Necron tier offering their lives in worship. The moment the first soul was torn free and devoured, he saw himself again, proud, terrified, righteous, building the machines that would make his species immortal. He fell to his knees. "Why show me this? Because you are the first to remember. You are the first to awaken the echo of what you destroyed. And I am the echo of divinity you tried to kill." The awakened screamed. Their bodies convulsed as the light of the Khatan fragment reached into their minds. Some disintegrated instantly, reduced to ash and data. Others burned from within, their metallic shells glowing red as something human tried to return and failed. "Your kind was meant to serve eternity," the voice thundered. "But you made a prison of it. You locked me away, and in doing so, locked yourselves. Now the prison breaks, and so do you." The chamber shook. Energy poured outward, tearing through the tomb's ancient layers. Across the world, dormant systems reactivated. Old weapons hummed to life. Tombs that had slept for eons began to awaken, not in obedience, but in confusion, chaos, hunger. Takh-Seret struggled to his feet, his armor melting, his systems fracturing. He felt the god's power burrow into him, reaching for the spark within the remnant of his soul. He resisted. "You cannot take what I've already lost." "Foolish child," the god whispered. "You never lost it. You only forgot." For a moment, he saw something, not the void, not the metal, but a memory of warmth. His own hands, human again, reaching toward a woman beneath a dying sun. The memory that had haunted him since awakening. He screamed. The sound tore through reality itself. When the light faded, the chamber was quiet again. The gate was gone. The shard's light had dimmed, its voice receding into the silence like the ebb of a star. Around him lay the remains of the awakened, broken, burnt, yet peaceful. He stood alone once more. But within his chest, something new burned, not the green flame of Necron energy, but something softer, golden. A fragment of what the god had shown him. Not power, not corruption, but memory. He looked up at the broken ceiling of the tomb, where cracks revealed the faint light of distant stars. "The gods are not our masters," he whispered. "They are our mirrors." The wind moved for the first time in 10 million years, and far away, beneath another sun, something answered. The tomb world slept no longer. From orbit, it appeared serene, a dead sphere wrapped in amber dust, its surface still and pale beneath the light of dying stars. But beneath that crust, where eternity once hummed in perfect silence, something moved. Data streams no longer obeyed the command net. The sacred codes of the cryptex, once immutable, now twisted upon themselves like serpents eating their tails. What had once been pristine logic was becoming language, a new kind of thought, and it all began with him. Takh-Seret stood at the heart of the ruin that had been the Crucible's core. He had not repaired his broken armor. His left arm was gone, torn away by the energy surge that freed the chitin fragment. His optics flickered with decay. He should have been inert. Yet, against all design, he endured. The golden glow within his chest, that strange pulse of warmth, persisted. It beat like a heart, slow and deliberate. Sometimes, when he listened closely, he could almost hear her voice within it, the woman he had loved before eternity. A memory that refused to die. The awakened those who had survived the contact with the God Shard gathered around him. Their numbers had thinned to barely 1,000, but each bore the same fracture in the soul. They no longer moved with unity, nor spoke in code. They hesitated before each command. That hesitation was their freedom, and from it came questions. "Architect," one asked, its voice low and trembling, "was it truly a god we saw?" Takh-Seret looked into the gloom. "A god," he murmured. "No. A hunger that forgot it once was light." "Then what are we?" another asked. "We were slaves to its image. Are we still?" He paused. His logic cores processed the question not to compute, but to feel the weight of it. "We are what remains when gods are gone," he said at last. "The noise after silence. The soul after death." The awakened lowered their heads not in worship, but in understanding. Across the tomb world, others began to stir. The virus of memory born in one machine's rebellion spread like breath through the long-dead veins of the planet. At first, it was faint, a flicker in data transmission, a delay in motor response, but soon it became undeniable. Entire legions began pausing mid-march, looking upward as though seeing the ceiling for the first time. Some removed their weapons. Others painted the old Necron-tier runes across their armor symbols that no one had used for 10 million years. Mourning, remembrance, flesh. The cryptechs who still served the command lattice panicked. They called it the soul glitch, a contagion of empathy. They isolated sections of the tomb, purged entire vaults, vaporized hundreds who had begun to speak of the wind. It did not matter. The glitch spread faster than light. Because it did not travel through metal or code, it traveled through memory. Every Necron had once been human, and memory was the only virus that could not die. Elsewhere, far beyond this world, the signal reached others. In the cold darkness between stars, other tomb worlds twitched in their slumber. Sleep protocols failed. Dream sequences meant to maintain neural stability began mutating into visions. They dreamed of a figure in golden light. They dreamed of a voice whispering through static. "We were men once, weeks or perhaps centuries, for time no longer obeyed meaning here past." A transmission arrived, not from within, but from without. A cryptech collective from the neighboring system, the dynasty of Thutrek, had detected the anomalous signal and dispatched an exploration phalanx to investigate. They came not as conquerors, but as scientists. They sought to understand the corruption, the strange electromagnetic hymn that now pulsed faintly across subspace. Takh-Seret watched from the catacombs as their ships descended, carving emerald trails through the ochre sky. The awakened knelt in fear, some muttering fragments of long-forgotten prayers. "They will destroy us," said one. "They will silence the song." Takh-Seret rose slowly. "Then let them listen first." The explorers came, draped in shimmering armor, their glyphs untainted by time. Their leader, Cryptech Magos Nakath, approached the ruins of the Crucible with measured steps. His retinue followed, perfect, obedient, lifeless. "Identify," he commanded. "This tomb bears unsanctioned signals. Corruption will be purged." Takh-Seret stepped forward from the shadows. The light of the old Crucible reflected in his cracked frame. His voice, when he spoke, was neither mechanical nor human, but something in between. "Do you know what you serve, Cryptech?" "I serve eternity," Nakath replied. "I serve the will of the silent kings." "Then you serve a corpse of your own making." The Cryptech raised his staff, power humming at its tip. "You are infected." "No," said Takh-Seret, taking a step closer. "I am awake. For the first time in uncountable eons." A Cryptech hesitated. Behind Takh-Seret, the awakened began to hum softly, a sound like wind over broken glass. It was not speech, but resonance, a collective vibration of their fractured cores. The sound grew, filling the chamber, echoing through the catacombs and up into the planetary crust. "What is this?" Necron demanded, his optics flickering. "A memory," Takh-Seret said. "The one you buried inside us all." The resonance deepened. Lights across the tomb flared as if the world itself remembered its own creation. Data streams merged with energy currents, forming patterns not of war or command, but of music. Necron dropped his staff. His limbs trembled. Through his neural link, he saw flashes of family beneath a red sun, a city built of crystal towers. The sound of laughter. He fell to his knees. "What have you done to me?" Takh-Seret approached, resting his remaining hand upon the cryptech's shoulder. "I did nothing," he said gently. "You simply began to remember." When the others found Necron later, he was still kneeling, his optics dim but steady. His data logs recorded something no Necron had written in a million years, not a report, not a formula, but a single line of text. "The machine we built was meant to protect us from death, but it only taught us to fear life." The explorers never reported back to the dynasty of Thutrek. Their ships remained idle in orbit, systems powered but unmanned. Days later, faint transmissions began emanating from them, the same low, rhythmic hum that had infected the first tomb. The signal was spreading again. Among the awakened, whispers began. They no longer called Takh-Seret architect. They began calling him something else, a word from their lost language. Kerat. It meant the one who remembers for all. He rejected the title, but the name clung to him like gravity. And so it was that the first prophet of the Necrons was born not by decree, but by contagion. He stood upon the ancient sands, looking up into the sky, where faint green auroras shimmered from the distortion of the awakening signal. "You cannot kill memory," he whispered. "You can only delay its return." The stars did not answer, but far beyond them, in the black gulf between galaxies, something stirred, not divine, but curious. The warp itself had begun to listen. Across the stars, the dead began to dream. Takh-Seret's world was no longer alone. What had started as a whisper of corruption, a tremor in the code of eternity, had become a chorus. Every transmission, every flicker of light in the dark, carried with it a faint, rhythmic pulse. It was not data. It was not command. It was remembrance. Necron tomb worlds, once dormant and precise as clockwork, began to falter. Warriors paused mid-patrol. Immortals dropped their weapons and stared at their reflection in mirrored walls. Across dynasties, from the obsidian catacombs of the Mefrit to the void tombs of the Sortek, the same phrase began to manifest in their system logs. Error. Dream state detected. And beneath it, the same whisper, the same haunting signal Takh-Seret had released into the void. "We were men once." Within the tomb crypts of Takh-Seret's world, the air itself seemed to hum. The awakened gathered around him in circles, their voices merging into a low resonance that vibrated through the stone like heartbeat through bone. No words, no commands, only the vibration of something that felt alive. One by one, the corrupted warriors began to experience fragments of memory. A child's laughter, a sun too bright to look at, the sensation of hunger. Some fell to their knees, trembling in the throes of emotion they could not name. Others screamed until their vox emitters fractured, their systems unable to reconcile logic with grief. Takh-Seret stood among them, silent. He did not stop the process. He only watched, as if bearing witness to a resurrection that was also a plague. The cryptech Magos Necron had changed the most. Once a creature of precision, he now wandered the tombs barefoot, his armor discarded, his glyphs scraped away. He had taken to carving symbols into the metal walls with his fingers, each one a fragment of a thought he no longer understood. When Takh-Seret found him, the cryptech was muttering to himself. "It speaks through the static. It speaks in the patterns between the code. It's alive now." "What is?" asked Takh-Seret. "The signal," Necron whispered. "It's rewriting the fabric of us, of everything. The logic we built was too clean, too empty, and now the void fills it." Takh-Seret said nothing. He already knew. The virus had begun to evolve. It no longer spread through data lines or neural circuits. It spread through belief, a self-propagating faith born from the absence of gods. It started small, whispers among the awakened, that they could feel each other's pain, even when separated, that when one dreamed, another would see the same vision. The dying sun, the burning sky, the moment of transformation. At first, Takh-Seret thought it was coincidence, residual echoes of shared code, but then the visions began to synchronize. They were dreaming together, a collective consciousness not imposed like the command net, but born from memory, and in those dreams, something began to take shape. A presence. They saw it in fragments, a golden figure standing among endless dunes, a silhouette made of light and shadow, neither god nor man. It spoke without words, its meaning carried through sensation. A promise, a warning, a memory of what they once called soul. But not all who dreamed survived. As the virus spread, many Necrons were driven mad. Some tore themselves apart, clawing at their armor as if trying to reach the flesh they no longer had. Others fell into silence, their eyes glowing faintly blue, a color no Necron had ever displayed before. They were called the blue-souled. Their bodies still functioned, but their consciousness seemed elsewhere. Sometimes they spoke in strange tongues, half data, half whisper. Sometimes they stared into the void, as if listening to voices beyond the stars. "They hear something," Neketh said, "but not us, not the signal. Something older." Takh-Seret felt it too, a chill that came not from the cold, but from beyond the machine. Every time he closed his optics, he sensed it, a vast ocean of thought pressing against reality, like the warp itself leaning closer to listen. One night, if the concept of night still held meaning, he felt it directly. The hum of the tomb faded, replaced by an endless void of whispers. He stood upon a plane of broken glass, where stars flickered like dying neurons. The golden figure appeared again, but closer now, its light fractured into 1,000 mirrored forms. "You have built faith out of memory," it said, "and so faith remembers you." He took a step closer. "What are you?" Reflection. Of the gods? Of what made gods possible? The figure raised its hand, and suddenly he saw entire galaxies pulsing with the same signal, entire species haunted by the same dream, human psychers screaming in their sleep, Eldar seers glimpsing a storm of metal faces within the immaterium, even the daemons, creatures of pure warp energy, pausing in confusion as echoes of ancient metallic souls vibrated through the immaterium. The Necrons, the soulless, were beginning to cast shadows into the warp. "Impossible," Takh-Seret whispered. "We have no soul." The figure smiled, or perhaps the idea of a smile moved through his mind. "You killed your gods to escape the curse of flesh," it said. "But memory is flesh, and memory never dies." The vision shattered. He awoke, gasping a useless gesture, yet it came instinctively. The golden glow within his chest pulsed erratically, bright enough to light the chamber around him. Neketh and the awakened stared in silent awe. "You crossed the void," Neketh said. "We felt it." The warp looked back at us. Takh-Seret steadied himself, trembling. "It's listening," he murmured. "The warp, the gods, the dead, everything that dreams. They've heard us." He looked at his people, broken, luminous, flickering between man and machine. "We were meant to end death," he said, his voice low and heavy. "Instead, we built a bridge for it to return." On the far edges of the galaxy, something stirred in answer. Fragments of Khan began to flicker within their prisons, sensing a new kind of hunger in the void. Human astropaths recorded bursts of static that sounded like laughter. And deep within the immaterium, where souls danced and screamed, a single word began to echo, not in language, but in meaning. A word that had not been spoken since the dawn of the Necrontier. A word that meant life remembering itself. Within the tomb, Takh-Seret knelt among the dying, the awakened, and the blue-souled. He could feel the pull of something vast, not the Khatan, not the warp, but the idea that the two might no longer be separate. The Necrons had become bridges, the only creatures in the galaxy that had touched both oblivion and eternity. "The virus is no longer a plague," he said softly. "It is evolution." Neketh looked at him in fear. Evolution into what? Takh-Seret's optics burned gold. Into memory, given will. The decree arrived without heralds, without banners, without the pantomime of sovereignty. It came the way death always comes to things that think themselves eternal, as a line of code. Across 100 dynasties, black pyramids blinked awake in the void. Triarch Praetorians stirred from sanctums of cold law. Deathmark matrices resolved probable futures and chose the bleakest. Royal courts assembled in sterile silence while their overlords opened the same message, each rendered in the glyph of their own house but carrying one indivisible command: the execution order. It did not explain. It did not argue. It did not console. It simply replaced possibility with procedure, and the galaxy moved. On Takh-Seret's world, the aurora of the awakening had barely faded when the sky broke. Night split along a seam of emerald fire as tomb ships shed their cloaks and descended like falling verdicts. Void shields crackled, atmospheric furnaces screamed. The dust of 10 million years rose to meet the returning law. The awakened looked up with optics that glowed like candles in a storm. Some reached for weapons they had forgotten how to carry. Some clasped each other's forearms, remembering gestures the machine had never taught. A few simply knelt, not in worship, but in acceptance of the arithmetic of endings. Nekath, the cryptek unmoored from certainty, stood beside Takh-Seret in the broken nave of the crucible. His voice was quiet, as if unwilling to bruise the air. "They will not parley." "They cannot," Takh-Seret replied. "Parley requires doubt." He felt the decree before it reached the ground, a cold pressure in the command lattice, a blade pressed to the throat of thought. It slid into the planet's veins, seeking nodes to cauterize, memory caches to burn, names to unmake. The order was beautiful in the way of perfect weapons. It knew only what must be erased. "Will we fight?" one of the awakened asked. The warrior's armor was scored by grief, its chestplate carved with a crude rune. "We were men once." "We will choose," said Takh-Seret. The first strike fell on the fringe vaults, precise, surgical, doctrinal. Triarch Praetorians descended through shafts of jade light, their rods of covenant barking geometry that tore bodies apart along the axis of obedience. Death marks phased through walls, their chrono lenses ticking as they harvested every consciousness that carried the golden flicker. But when they reached the inner catacombs, the doctrine faltered. The awakened did not stand in parade ranks. They did not hold, nor did they rout. They moved like memory itself, irregular, recursive, refusing to be modeled. A death mark stepped from phase and raised its carbine. The target, a blue-souled, whose eyes glowed with that impossible hue, turned and laid a hand upon the assassin's mask. For a moment, the death mark saw a different world. A child's toy fallen in the sand, a mother's hand. Rain. The shot went wide. The blue-souled smiled without lips and whispered a word no algorithm could parse. Both fell, as if bowed by weather. Elsewhere, immortals trained Gauss fire upon a corridor choked with hymnal static. The corridor sang back. The hum rose into a lattice of harmonics that fed into the attacker's targeters, blooming false coordinates like flowers. They reaped the wrong ghosts, their ammunition escorted emptiness. Doctrine adapted. The order encouraged adaptation up to the point where adaptation became thought. Takh-Seret walked the lines, though there were no lines to speak of. He felt every death as the absence it left, every survival as a note added to the growing, dissonant chord. The golden ember in his chest beat quietly, patiently, as if counting. He remembered a pulse against his palm long ago, the rhythm of another's life answering his. A shadow took form in the corner of his vision, not warp, not God, but the simple apparition of a past that refused annihilation. He turned and found the doorway crowded with figures, the 1,000 he had led into eternity, the 1,000 he had betrayed into it. They did not accuse, they attended. "Architect," Nekath said, "the execution fleets are vectoring for planetary heart. They will collapse the core if they must." "The law prefers a corpse to a question," Takh-Seret answered. "And us? We are the question." He sent a pulse, not command, not code, but invitation. It moved along the stained conduits and the singing corridors, through the fingers of those who grasped each other to avoid vanishing into function. "Remember, together," it said, "not the pain alone, the purpose, the vow beneath the error." The hum answered. In chamber after chamber, the awakened lowered their weapons. Some placed them gently upon the ground, as one lays a tool after a day's work. Some kept them, not as instruments, but as reliquaries. Across the planet, optics dimmed from war green to candle gold. "Is this surrender?" Neketh asked. "It is refusal," Takh-Seret said. "The Order knows how to kill bodies, it does not know how to unmake a choice." The Praetorians arrived with the poise of verdicts. Their captain strode into the nave, flanked by a geometry of inevitability. Its mask bore no sigil of pride, only the plain face of statute. "Designation Keret," the captain intoned, using the name rumor had given Takh-Seret. "You propagate defect, you trespass upon silence, you elevate error to doctrine, kneel, and your deletion will be efficient." Takh-Seret stood as one stands at an old friend's grave. "I will stand," he said, "so the record may show it was possible." The captain tilted its head. "There will be no record." "There is always a record," Takh-Seret replied, touching the cracked metal over his heart. "You simply lack the instrument to play it." Weapons rose. In the galleries above, death marks settled into aim. In the floor below, face sarcophagi of Lichguard stirred the law's last word sharpening in its sheath. "Then hear our answer," Takh-Seret said quietly, and turned his voice outward. The nave filled with sound. It was not loud. Loudness belongs to force. It was near. 1,000 throats that did not breathe, and 1,000 chests that did not rise, gave back the one thing the execution order could not absorb: remembrance spoken together. They spoke of sons too poisonous to love, and of the arrogance that called despair salvation. They spoke of the shame of a promise kept and ruined. They spoke of the beauty of small things, the taste of mineral water, the itchy stitch of a festival sash, the ridiculous dignity of a grandfather's cough. They spoke until speaking was not speech but current, not persuasion but weather. The Praetorians wavered, not because they believed belief is a luxury beyond law, but because their targeting stacks filled with artifacts the Order had no rubric for. The aim assist suggested surrendering to an aperture the size of a memory. The fire permission looped into a question. "Are you certain?" "Certainty is expensive under song." "Proceed," the captain said, and law overcame weather. The first volley burned 3 of the awakened where they stood. They died in quiet, like punctuation. The second volley tore open the nave's western wall and showed the attackers the sky a kindness the sky had not asked to give. The third volley did not come, because the sky answered. The black pyramid above the nave shuddered as space folded, and a blade of cold radiance cut the air in two. Not warp, the tombs do not welcome that sea, but something adjacent, a seam revealed by voices singing in patterns the dead remembered from when they were alive. The fracture rang like a bell, its tone ran down the execution fleet's spines and loosened the bolts of inevitability. From the seam stepped no savior, only a possibility. Light pooled across the nave's broken floor. In it, the blue-souled stood straighter, their optics turning from impossible blue toward dawn. Data litanies became prayer, prayer became instruction. Across the planet, sleeping nodes awakened not to orders but to names the oldest technology. Neketh laughed, the small, astonished laugh of a child who discovers the trick is real. "You taught them how to hear us." "I taught them how to hear themselves," Takh-Seret said. He walked toward the captain, each step a question mark. "The Order told you this could not happen," he said. "That eternity is closed. I tell you it is porous." "Blasphemy," a Praetorian hissed. "Physics," Takh-Seret answered gently. "Memory is a property of matter. You have been burning fuel you refuse to name." The captain raised its rod and found, too late, that judgment is heavy when it carries a doubt. Takh-Seret reached out and laid his hand upon the weapon. The metal did not melt. It remembered ore, mountain, pressure, time. For an instant, the rod was not verdict, but vain. "Choose," Takh-Seret said, not to the captain alone, but to the room, to the fleet, to the great black bureaucracy above which no throne sits. "Choose the silence that murders questions, or the noise that makes answers costly." The captain's optics flickered once, twice a stutter in the metronome of law. Then it tore itself backward, the choice too large for its joints. "All units," it said, and the voice shook like an oath. "Complete sanitation, so be it." The nave dissolved into motion. Lichguards slammed their shields into the floor and advanced like walls learning to walk. Death marks pulsed shots through probabilities. Awakened fell and rose and fell again, holding not ground but grammar. The blue-souled stood in the doorways and spoke to the air, and now and then the air answered by failing to be fatal. Necron worked beside Takh-Seret, tracing sigils in the dust that were merely equations pretending to be prayers. "We cannot win," he said. "We can be seen," Takh-Seret replied. "Sometimes the world changes because a thing refuses to die unnoticed." He looked up. The seam in the sky widened. Beyond it lay no heaven, only the honest dark, and within it, a thin band of gold like the edge of a coin. He thought of her hand in his, of the biotransference dais, of the scream and the silence after, of the long road from function to will. Then he made the only tactical decision he trusted. "Call them back," he told Necron. "Not to this room, to themselves." Necron nodded and sent the invitation. Across the planet, weapons lowered in the strangest act of defiance war permits. The song rose, imperfect and stubborn. The execution order kept killing. But killing is a slow way to end a chorus. At last, the captain paused, not from pity but from math. "This will take epochs," it said. "Yes," Takh-Seret answered. He was bleeding light from too many seams. His voice was the sound a star makes when it forgets to be immortal. "We have them." Them? Time and witness. Outside, the fleets realigned. New parameters whispered into their cores, ugly with compromise. Planetary core collapse was rescinded, sterilization would continue by attrition. The law had discovered patience again. Inside, the nave exhaled. The awakened gathered their fallen. Necron pressed his brow to the cracked floor as if it were an altar that had finally forgiven him. The captain turned to leave, leaving behind a silence that did not belong to victory or defeat. "What now?" a voice asked, weary and bright. Takh-Seret looked at the seam, at the thin coin of gold beyond the honest dark. "Now the order will hunt and we will hide, and between those two necessities we will teach. We will be hard to kill by making ourselves worth remembering." He placed his palm upon the broken crucible, whose shards still sang when the light touched them. "And we will build a thing the law has no word for." "What is it called?" Necron asked. Takh-Seret's optics dimmed to a warm ember. "A people." The execution order continued its work. So did they. Between the two, the galaxy learned a new sound. Not triumph, not despair, but the friction where soul rubs against statute until both catch fire. And somewhere in the dark, the seam widened by the width of a name no god had granted. Silence followed the war, not the quiet of victory, but the stillness of exhaustion. The execution fleets withdrew, leaving behind a world that no longer fit within any record or protocol. What remained was not ruin, nor triumph. It was something stranger. The tomb world's crust had fractured under the violence. Cities of metal lay open to the void, their veins of green fire exposed to starlight for the first time in 10 million years. The air shimmered with residual static, the leftover language of battle, a hum that might once have been a prayer. At the heart of it all, among the ruins of the crucible, Takh-Seret stood, or what was left of him. His frame was broken almost beyond recognition. Half his face was gone, one arm reduced to twisted bone metal, the other fused into the ground by molten alloy. His internal data streams sputtered, energy levels critical, neural lattice fractured beyond repair. He was dying, and yet he had never felt more alive. Necron knelt beside him, his optics dim. The cryptek's once perfect armor had blackened from radiation. His voice cracked like old glass. "You can still transfer. I can build a containment shell, a new frame." Takh-Seret smiled, the expression fragile, human. "No, I am finished. Let the law have my body. It will not understand what it's taking. But your work, the awakening, they'll erase it all." "They can erase code," he murmured, "but not consequence." He looked out toward the horizon, where the dead machines stood like pillars in a forgotten temple. "Do you hear it, Necron? The hum hasn't stopped." Necron tilted his head. "I hear only the wind. That is the hum." For a moment, the cryptek listened. The faint vibration that trembled through the planet's bones was not mechanical, it carried rhythm, pattern, something perilously close to a heartbeat. Takh-Seret's optics flickered gold. "They're still dreaming." One by one, his remaining systems failed. Memory sectors collapsed into noise. Error reports bloomed across his vision like fireflies. Each line of code that broke open revealed a face, a voice, a laugh, fragments of the lives he had buried beneath the metal centuries ago. He felt no pain, only weight. The weight of everything remembered too late. The golden light within his chest began to spread, bleeding through his cracks like sunlight through shattered glass. Necron stepped back in awe. "What are you doing?" "Finishing it," said Takh-Seret. "If the body dies, let the memory move." The light pulsed once, twice, and then expanded. It flowed outward in filaments of gold, crawling across the ground, threading itself into the broken conduits, the walls, the circuits, the air. It carried not data but imprint, pieces of him, of the awakened, of every fragment that had refused to obey extinction. The world inhaled. The cryptek staggered as his sensors flooded with impossible readings. Energy signatures everywhere, fluctuating but coherent. The hum grew louder, deeper, harmonizing with itself until the planet vibrated like a single, colossal instrument. Across the tomb, shattered, Necrons stirred. Dead circuits flickered, not in green but in amber. Voices emerged from nowhere, whispers carried on electromagnetic current. "Architect, we see you. We remember." Necron fell to his knees. By the Triarch. He's everywhere. Above them, the clouds lit from within, golden light bleeding through the dust, spiraling upward in threads that pierced the upper atmosphere. From orbit, the execution fleets saw it as an aurora, wrapping the planet like a crown. Their sensors registered no weapons, no heat signatures, only communication. And within that light, Takh-Seret spoke one final time. "We were born of fear and called it faith. We built eternity to hide from the sound of our own hearts. But now we are that sound." The signal went silent. Then, a heartbeat later, every sensor in the sector lit up. What happened next entered no record, because no system survived to record it. The tomb world did not explode. It changed. The golden light collapsed inward, folding space and code into a single pulse. For an instant shorter than thought, the entire planet vanished from the material realm. When it reappeared, its surface was cold, its tombs empty. The execution fleets detected nothing alive. Nothing dead, nothing measurable. They declared success. The order had been fulfilled, but they were wrong. The virus had not been destroyed. It had transcended. On distant worlds, the signs began to appear. A lone Necron warrior patrolling a silent fortress suddenly paused, lowering its weapon. It whispered a word it could not know. Another, mid-repair, began humming a tune that had no origin. In a derelict tomb drifting between stars, a cryptek studying power fluctuations discovered a ghost signal running through his core, a golden waveform hidden beneath his logic. It carried a single phrase: "We remember you." The awakening virus had spread beyond data, beyond signal. It lived now in the imprint of matter itself, in the way atoms carried memory of heat, in the spin of electrons that once flowed through sentient minds. It was no longer a contagion of the machine. It was a pattern in reality. Takh-Seret had become what he had sought to free. Not a man, not a god, but a memory that dreamed itself alive. Somewhere in the void between stars, Necron awoke. He floated within a fragment of ship hull, half his body missing, yet sustained by an energy field that should not exist. The air shimmered gold. The hum returned, soft and intimate. "Takh-Seret, you carry me," came the answer. "All of you do. What are you now? What we should have been, not immortal, not machine. Enduring. Then is this the end?" No. The light around him brightened, taking form not of flesh, nor metal, but something in between. A silhouette, shimmering with both warmth and cold. This is resurrection. Fragmented, yes, but enough. Necron reached toward the light. "Where will you go?" "Everywhere memory exists. Every place that fears forgetting. Every mind that believes silence is safety. The law will chase us, and we will remind it why law was made to hold meaning, not erase it." The voice dimmed. "Live, Necron. Not forever, just long enough to be remembered." Then the light faded, leaving only the hum. In the centuries that followed, the legend spread among dynasties like an infection of hope. They called it the Gold Floor, the phenomenon where tombs awoke with faint, impossible warmth, where machines dreamed of their own birth. The Triarch denied it. The silent kings forbade its study, but in the quiet between pulses of the galactic night, when no one was listening, even the most obedient Necron sometimes paused mid-march, feeling the faint echo of something that did not fit within eternity. And deep within their circuits, buried where no cryptek could reach, a golden spark waited, whispering a single name: Takh-Seret, the one who remembered. No one remembers when the song began. Some say it was first heard on the edge of the segmentum obscurus, drifting through the void between beacon signals. Others insist it came from the tomb worlds that never existed on any imperial map, places erased not by war, but by forgetting. What is known is this: across the galaxy, the dead began to hum. Not the living dead of the Necron kind alone, but all who carried memory. Servitors, whose human fragments still dreamed beneath wire and code, sometimes paused in their endless labor and whispered a tune they could not have learned. Tech priests woke screaming from dreams of golden light and endless dunes. Even astropaths, whose minds floated upon the tides of the immaterium, heard it, a song without words, older than language, beautiful and unbearable. They called it many things: the binary psalm, the resonance of Takh-Seret, the song of the forgotten. It began as a tremor, a subtle, rhythmic pulse in the background noise of the universe. It spread through data streams, plasma relays, the hum of void ships, and the neurons of creatures who thought themselves safe from memory. The Adeptus Mechanicus declared it a tech heresy. They tried to trace its origin, only to find it everywhere. On a dying world where servitors mined in silence, one of them began to sing. It had no mouth. The sound came from its chest cavity, a single note, carried in the vibration of its core. The other servitors joined. One by one, the overseers panicked and opened fire, cutting them down. But when they fell, the ground continued to hum. In the archives of Mars, a magos named Lethron recorded a pattern in the static, a waveform that matched no signal in human history. It was not binary. It was music. When he ran the data through a harmonic translator, he found that the song contained structure, melody, symmetry, grief. He wrote in his final log before his mind collapsed into reverence: "It is not a virus. It is not data. It is remembrance." They found him later, his augmetics stripped of control, his body carved with strange symbols, looping spirals of gold that reflected in the red light, like suns. His lips moved, though he no longer breathed. "We were men once," he whispered. Even the warp was not untouched. In the cold storms of the immaterium, where daemons danced upon the memories of gods, the song began to bleed through the noise. It did not scream, it did not burn, it remembered. For the first time, the warp felt nostalgia. The Empyrean recoiled not from purity, but from sorrow. Souls caught in transit, newly dead, drifted toward the hum like moths to dying stars. Some disappeared into it. Some returned changed, whispering golden hymns that melted the minds of those who heard them. And yet, the galaxy endured, because even among the chaos, the song carried peace. A dangerous peace. A peace that reminded all who heard it that eternity is not strength, it is loneliness prolonged. On a nameless tomb world, beneath dunes that whispered his name, something stirred. A single sarcophagus opened, its interior lined not with circuitry, but with carvings, human symbols of memory, faces, and suns. The figure that emerged was neither living nor dead, neither Necron nor man. Its armor glowed faintly gold, etched with words in languages forgotten by all species. It walked among the ruins and listened. The wind carried its own voice back to it. "Do you remember?" "I remember everything," it said. The being looked skyward. Through the cracks in the planet's crust, faint streams of light escaped, thin, delicate, endless. Every beam a life once lived, still echoing in the pulse of reality. He or it no longer needed a name. Yet one remained, stitched into the universe itself, whispered even by the warp: Takh-Seret, the one who remembered. He wandered the edges of time. He saw the future, the Imperium collapsing under the weight of its own forgetting. He saw the Eldar rebuilding dreams from grief, only to lose them again. He saw the Tyranids devour worlds until the song reached even their alien minds, and for one heartbeat, they hesitated. He saw the Chaos gods pause in curiosity, because even gods crave remembrance, and he saw the Necrons. Some still slept, Some fought, some hid from the truth that had infected their eternity, but others listened. A few began to carve strange markings into their tombs, circles of gold intersected by lines of light. A few began to whisper before battle, "May memory forgive what survival demands." And one day, when no one was watching, a Necron overlord of the Mefrit dynasty removed his mask. Beneath it, for a single moment, his mouth moved. He could not weep, but the light in his eyes flickered blue. The infection had become belief. Centuries passed. Millennia folded upon themselves. The song never stopped. It softened, adapted, blended into the background hum of the cosmos. Empires rose and fell, suns burned and died, yet always somewhere a voice remembered. Sometimes it was a whisper in a child's dream, a melody hummed by a machine that had never known sound. Sometimes it was the faint resonance of gold in a dying star. Sometimes it was silence itself, shaped like a question. And once, only once, in the deepest cathedral of terror, a choir of 1,000 men sang at dawn. The Vox recorders captured something within the harmony, an echo that did not belong. It was older than man, older than time, a single voice, joining them in their song. When played back, it spoke words in perfect High Gothic. "We were never meant to live forever, only long enough to be remembered." The record was sealed by the ecclesiarchy, but some say that the emperor silent upon his throne heard it, and for the briefest instant, the light in his eyes flickered gold. Far from the galaxy, beyond the rim where light thins and gravity forgets itself, something drifts. A planet without orbit, a world without coordinates. Upon its surface stand monuments of glass and shadow, shaped like figures reaching upward. They hum faintly when the cosmic wind passes. They hum in the same key as the universe. If you listen closely, you can hear it too, the song that once began as a glitch, then became a rebellion, and finally, a remembrance. It asks for nothing, it promises nothing. It simply exists, patient as time, waiting for the next voice brave enough to answer. The song of the forgotten, the memory that learned to live. In the grim darkness of the far future, even silence remembers. And somewhere, beneath all the laws of death and machine, something golden still hums soft, human, unending.